So the Microsoft reveal of the new Xbox just wrapped up, and I'm going to quickly go through all of the news that happened, some of the stuff that wasn't revealed on the show that's just now coming out. So the new Xbox is called the Xbox One. It'll be out this year, most likely in October or November. Forza 5 will be a launch title. Remedy's working on a game. We saw a lot of Call of Duty Ghosts, which, until we actually see HD gameplay, we're not going to know much about this. The same thing goes with the Forza trailer that we saw. I mean, that could have been any Forza trailer. It was CG. We saw brief moments of Call of Duty gameplay, but like I said, quite frankly, because we didn't get an HD feed of this, it's hard to tell exactly what kind of jump visually that we got. They did do a side-by-side comparison of showing past models and current models. But again, because we're not seeing HD clarity on these, we're seeing very compressed, low-res feeds. It's hard to tell what we're looking at visually. We're going to see some stage demos and some hands-on stuff at E3 in a couple of weeks. So we're just going to have to wait until then to see what the next generation of games really looks like. Overall, the press conference it was kind of a mixed bag. They showed off the hardware. They showed the direction that they're going. They showed the actual Xbox. I'm going to show you a picture here. It looks big, but I kind of expected it to look big. The controller looks great. They're all coming with Kinect. They didn't give out a price. I would expect $400 or $500. Maybe $500 is more realistic at this point. They didn't. They said that Kinect would be faster, but they didn't say how much faster. In my opinion, it needs to be about 40 to 45 times faster than the original Kinect, or it's still going to be too slow. There's a lot of integration with TV. They didn't say how it integrates, but I can kind of give you a rundown of what I expect. I expect it to be very similar to the Logitech review, where the Xbox One is going to have a television input. So you'll go from your cable box or your satellite box, plug an HDMI cable from that box into your Xbox One, and then your Xbox One will have an HDMI out. So you don't have to change your inputs when going from your television. For example, I can, in my Logitech review, it's basically, I use it mainly as a DLNA media player, so I can play movies off of my PC. So I don't have to switch my inputs to do that. I can just hit a button on the Logitech review. They also have sort of a picture-in-picture thing where you can run multiple apps on the screen. They were showing television and Internet Explorer at the same time. They didn't show being able to play a game while watching TV at the same time. That would be pretty cool, especially with sporting events, which they showed a lot of stuff with ESPN, and they're bringing NFL as well. They showed, for example, you could be watching a basketball game, and anytime a player scores, it'll show a little ticker saying that player scored and show that player's stats. And you could also check on your fantasy team over on the right side of the screen as well. But I'd like to be able to maybe play like a racing game or something that's very, kind of just relaxing or casual or whatever, while a sporting event's going on. Maybe a game that I'm not that interested in, but I could have it up in the top right of my screen, and then maybe mix the audio together as well. They didn't show anything like that. You would think you could do that. You can do it in the Logitech review, but it's a little bit wonky. You can't choose which is the big screen, and you can't choose which pulls the audio. So I can't have like a sporty game going while I'm watching a movie. I mean, I can, but I can't choose which is which. So I really hope they do that. The dashboard looked really almost identical. To the Xbox 360. They did show a guy on stage what appeared to be controlling the dashboard via Kinect. Who knows if he was actually doing it or not? It could have just been simulated. They usually do simulations in case something crashes, so they don't have to worry about it. It looked pretty simulated, but if it was simulated, they did a good job. They actually showed delays when he would say, when he would give a command, voice command. They would wait a second before it registered. So at least they were realistic about that, to at least make you think that it was live. Now, here's some things that came out after the show. The Xbox One will not be backwards compatible with the Xbox 360. Now, does that mean we're going to lose all of our achievements? I don't know, but it's starting to look like it. I guess it kind of makes sense if you're not going to be able to play those games. It sucks that you can't play Xbox 360 games on an Xbox One, because look, eventually these games, eventually there's not going to be any Xbox 360s around. It's going to be tough to get one, and if your system dies and you've got, like, I've got about 350 Xbox 360 games. I have one working Xbox, an Xbox Slim. I got a couple of dead Xboxes that my dumb ass never got fixed. But what happens if, that Xbox Slim just sits around so long and it just dies, I don't know, maybe some dust gets in it or something, who knows. And I'll be able to probably buy one for $100 or $2 here in the next 4 or 5 years. But eventually they're going to stop making them. They're going to become much more difficult to find, even though we have these discs. And you can always install them on the hard drive, and as long as the disk works at least a little bit, your system could recognize it. So it sucks we're not getting backwards compatibility. That really sucks. But on the positive side, who knows? Maybe years down the road, somebody will write an emulator for the Xbox 360, which has happened. You can emulate pretty much all old school games, and even Saturn. I remember, you can emulate Sega Saturn games now, and that used to be something that was just so unheard of. But in the last several years, people have come up with some pretty damn good emulators. So we'll have to wait and see. I doubt it's going to happen just because of the complexity of the dashboard and everything. But who knows? Maybe Microsoft will come out with an emulator when hardware just becomes so powerful that you can just run it, even if the architecture is nowhere near the same as current gen, just because the hardware is so powerful they could pull it off. But at the same time, do we ever really think about going back and I've got a bunch of Xbox games, but I don't have an Xbox. My Xbox is dead, but I never think about going back and playing those games. So I think we always want backwards compatibility, but at the same time I think we start to crave it less and less because we start to think, wow, those games were so primitive. Right now these games are so advanced, but when the next generation and the next generation hit, they're not going to be as advanced. So maybe it's not that big of a deal, but you do kind of feel like when you see all these games sitting there that you can't play, maybe you wasted your money. Next thing is, there's been the Xbox One. I couldn't think of the damn name of it. It does not have to always be connected to the internet. However, games have to be installed on the hard drive. So when you buy a new game, the entire game is installed on the hard drive. I'm not exactly sure why this is. In terms of if maybe they have a slow Blu-ray drive, but that's not the reason why they're doing it. The reason why they're doing this is because when you install the game on your hard drive, the disc will then become useless. You don't even need the disc anymore. And it's going to tie that game to your gamer tag. So, positive, you never have to put in a disc. You can just sit there and play all the games from your hard drive, never have to get up and swap out a disc. The negative, the disc is then useless. If you put it in another Xbox and try to play it, what happens is you're going to have to pay Microsoft to unlock that. Now, they didn't say how much it's going to cost, but the disc basically becomes useless once you've installed it. Now, the good thing is, if you buy a new Xbox or whatever they come out with, the slim Xbox One, you can just you can get your gamer tag on there. Unfortunately, pros and cons here, you're going to have to sit there and reinstall all of those games, which is horrible, which could take a long time, especially if you're on horribly slow 5 meg internet like I am. But at least you'll always have them. You don't have to worry about scratch discs or anything like that. I've got a few games that are scratched that you can't even find them in stores anymore. I basically have to just rebuy the game. Like I've got the Simpsons, the EA Simpsons game, which I really enjoy, but my nephew scratched it to oblivion. So if I want a new copy, I can't get it repaired or swap. You used to be able to swap games at Walmart if you had a scratch copy, even if you didn't buy it from there. But anyways, what else do we have? Seems like there's something else that leaked. It doesn't have to always be on. They are doing. This is something they very briefly touched on, the number of servers that they've had since the original Xbox launched. They started with 500 servers, then 1,500, then 3,000, and I think they said that they're going to have 30,000 when this system launches. And one of the reasons why is they're going to do some cloud gaming. One of the very interesting things they talked about was giving developers access to servers for other computing. For example, let's say you release a game. Okay, a developer releases a game, and the Xbox possibly needs a little bit more power. What they could actually do is they could take the power of those servers, those cloud servers, and kind of mix it in. For example, if you think about OnLive, the way OnLive worked, you didn't have any games on your system. It would send basically your controller inputs to a server where the game was being played, and then it would send back video to you. They could technically do things like that. The presentation, the presenter on stage, I don't remember who it was, but he said it could be used for more games in online games, more players, in online games. I started thinking about that. At first I thought maybe what they mean is they can use this as dedicated servers. Remember, Microsoft didn't host dedicated servers, and so most of these publishers, they didn't want to do dedicated servers because they didn't have to pay for their own dedicated servers. Microsoft wasn't really clear on this. So I don't know if they could use that cloud computing for dedicated servers. I don't know if Infinity Ward, for example, could say, hey, we need to use like 1,000 of these servers for dedicated servers, so Activision doesn't have to pay for them because Activision doesn't want to pay for servers. That could be Microsoft's way of knowing that gamers want dedicated servers, getting dedicated servers. Unfortunately, 30,000 dedicated servers. I mean, I don't. It's going to be on a game-to-game basis. You would have to figure that Microsoft is still going to charge developers for using these services, and it's going to scale based on how much they're using. So we don't really know exactly what developer cloud computing means exactly. From our perspective, cloud computing, we will be able to do all of our game saves with cloud computing, cloud storage, I guess, more than that. They do have a PVR/DVR, whatever you want to call it, system built in. They talked about it very briefly. They showed almost nothing on it, which leads me to believe that it was something that when they saw Sony had it, they said, shit, we got to do this too. So they just very, very quickly at the end threw it on to the presentation. So that's a little bit alarming that maybe they didn't have that thought of. They also didn't say that they would have a DVR for television. And to me, that would be something great. That would be fantastic to have it, because a Logitech Review doesn't have it, which is really obnoxious. My TV has a DVR built in. I got to plug in a USB drive. It'd be really, really cool if we could use our Xbox One to record television. What else do we have? Differences between some things Sony announced. Now, Sony announced the whole picking up a controller and playing your friend's game. I think there's some smoke and mirrors with that. Microsoft doesn't have it. I believe that the person who plays, both players are going to have the game. I don't believe it's going to stream it like it does with on live, where, you know, and the reason why is because both of these guys are going to have really great internet connections with very low latency. I mean, you're going to have incredible pings to be able to sit there and send that data back and forth. We're talking video. Somebody's got to send the video, and the other person's got to receive it. And to do that in remotely real time, to have a ping of, let's say, anything more than like 60 or 70 milliseconds, to me is completely unplayable. And even 50 milliseconds, which is a good internet ping, that would be horrible for playing games with. You know, I played on live, and on live wasn't that bad, but the servers we were connected to were incredibly powerful. We weren't connecting to people on DSL or cable connections. So my expectation is it's going to be completely unplayable unless both players have the game. So that you're not loading any video, and then at that point, it's going to be up to the developers to put that into their game. It's not going to be something that's standard, so how many developers are actually going to put that in? If you're going to put in that sort of network connectivity, you may as well just make your game co-op in the first place. So a single-player game, you're not going to put that in. Like I said, you may as well just make the game co-op and let two people play it. So my expectation on that feature, Sony's going to force it on 2 or 3 developers, and that's going to be the end of it. We're not going to see it too much, so I'm not too worried about that. One big feature, though, I like Sony's low power mode, provided the system doesn't freeze up while it's in low power mode. So you can turn the system back on, and it picks up right where you left off. We'll have to see kind of how much power low power mode does use, because it's got to keep the memory loaded. Everything's got to stay in memory. There's things it can turn off. I guess it could turn off the GPU. It can't turn off the CPU completely. It may be able to turn off several cores. It can turn off the hard drive, things like that. So low power mode is still going to cost money. So if you're playing a game late at night, 10 or 11, say, oh man, I got to go to work tomorrow. You shut off your system, you get home the next day, and you turn it back on, and it's been 15, 16 hours. I mean, how much is is it really worth however much electricity that uses? It'll just be pennies most likely. Maximum maybe 10 cents. I don't know. But is it worth it when you could have just turned your system on and been right back in? So those are the big differences. Overall, I would say Microsoft set up E3 very well. We didn't see much in terms of games. EA came and did a presentation that really they were just talking about FIFA because, quite frankly, they're trying to get more. Microsoft, that is trying to get more Europeans to buy Xboxes. I'm disappointed because I wanted to see games. I wanted to see stage demos. I felt like Sony showed more. I think Sony will be considered the winners this time in terms of revealing the hardware. However, I think that Microsoft was a little bit more realistic. I think Sony, as they tend to do, they showed things that I don't have a lot of faith in. For example, saying that, hey, we don't have backwards compatibility, but you will be able to play games, all the classic games through the cloud. Look, playing games through the cloud, playing games on a server and having it streaming back to you, it sucks. On live, I don't even think they lasted a year. Now, don't get me wrong, having to pay retail prices for games was pretty ridiculous, but that technology, very few people could get the most out of it. The games were very low res. It was like playing through JPEGs. The input delay was horrific at times, and it was a very inconsistent feeling. you've been better off just pirating your games and buying a nice PC for $500 or $600. So I think Sony's cloud computing is a little bit more smoke and mirrors than what we're seeing. I like what I've seen with Microsoft, but I need to see games. That's what we're going to see at E3. So it's going to be very interesting to see where this goes from here. But the one thing I will say is Microsoft forcing installation of games and then making those games not work after that. I mean, it depends on what they're going to charge. Look, if they charge $5, if you got to pay $5, I don't have a problem with that. That's okay. But if they say you got to pay $20 or $30 to re-unlock that game, here's the other problem. If they say it's $5, well, then you could just bring in a game, buy a brand new game, load it on your system, and give it to your friend. Say, hey man, give me $5, and he installs it, and the next person installs it. So that's why I don't think it's going to be $5. I think it's going to be $30 or $40. I think that's what it's going to cost. But at the same time, I think Microsoft feels like, hey, if we can get a chunk of that used gaming market, that would be great. The problem is, GameStop's not going to take these games. I guess what GameStop could do is they could take a disc, and I guess they could pay the amount to kind of, quote-unquote, virginize the disc, and then subtract that from what they're willing to pay someone. But at this point, it's getting a little bit crazy, a little bit confusing. The other question I have, if the Xbox doesn't have to always be on, how's it going to validate that game? You're going to have to be online to validate that game, to validate that game has not been installed yet. So it may as well be online, always online at that point. So maybe Microsoft's got a little smoke and mirrors of their own, but it's going to be very interesting. I think this is going to be a very trivial, a very bumpy start to the next generation. I think gamers are going to be pissed off at some of the features they thought they were getting that turn out to be lousy, like Sony's pick up the controller and play your friend's game. I think this whole installation thing, gamers are going to be pissed at Microsoft. But I think by this time next year, we'll be, okay, we accept it, fine. It sucks. It's just like paying for Xbox Live. We all accept it. Even the $5 per year increase in price, we finally accepted it. It becomes common. You wish you could go back, but you can't. You just accept it. We're slaves. We're all slaves to these manufacturers. And really, what I care about more than anything else are the games. That's what I care about. I want to see great new innovations. I'm not going to be the guy that says, oh, I'm not going to buy a next-generation console. Of course I'm going to buy a next-generation. We're all going to buy a next-generation console. You're not a gamer if you don't. You can sit there and piss and moan and protest at what you're seeing all you want. We're all slaves because, what are we going to do? Go buy the fucking Ouya and play some Android games? We're going to play Angry Birds with a fucking controller? Of course not. So that's my take on it. We'll see what happens at E3. E3 is going to be very interesting. I'm kind of glad Microsoft didn't blow their wad early, shoot their wad early on what was supposed to be a dry run. As I remember, a new season of Arrested Development coming out in just a few days, which is exciting. But I'm glad they saved something for E3. We got a little bit of an insight of what's going on. I'm not even sure they needed this press conference, but hey, they filled out an hour, so unless you want your E3 press conference to go 3 hours, this made a lot of sense. So excited, but at the same time a little disappointed.